one of the things I want to do is I want to be able to introduce you to the audience very much, Ross Boone, and the way I met you. And I think the best way to do that is through your video. The video that you made, we're going to watch you introduce yourself to all of us.
All right. Hey, I'm Ross Boone. I'm an engineer and designer. I've designed products in stores like Home Depot and Ace Hardware, and I've done illustrations for companies like Chick-fil-A, Amazon, and even the US Women's Olympic soccer team. I've written and done art for blogs by Focus on the Family and Our Daily Bread. I've made music video animations that have had hundreds of thousands of views. I also have a degree in theology, but I didn't get it to be a pastor. I found a job that only takes a day or two each week so that I can spend most of my time seeking answers for my qualms with God, which tend to find me a lot, and experimenting with hacks to get closer to Him. And then, when I've found something good, I attempt to give those both away to you in formats that bend our souls towards Him. I've found that we need solid reasoning to open the door and emotional content to draw us in through that door. So like my brain does, I have attempted to bring both the head and the heart together here. I've recorded books of miracles when I was searching for proof. I've written hundreds of blogs with ideas that have helped me with my questions, and studied the power of stories and art pieces to help topple us into His love. I've often turned all these into podcasts and animations to help you receive them better as well. I've also developed pages in the free members area of this site where you can find your mission, organize your tasks, and track your goals each week. You have a purpose, and I want to help you pursue it. And of course, please check out my free app on the app stores because it brings all of these things together in a beautiful, interactive dose each day. It's called Creature Habits. With it, I'm trying to make spiritual disciplines the world's favorite distraction. Instagram, TikTok, what are those? Please reach out. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what's working for you and what's not. I make all of this stuff for you to receive, but the true reward is to hear the stories of those I'm journeying with. Let's seek the face of our Creator together.
Thank you for introducing yourself. That is just amazing. So let's start with qualms with God. Let's dig in there, and because qualms with God is something that many of us in our lives have had. So tell me your experience, Ross.
Yeah, I was raised in a conservative Christian household, good parents. It was a nice church. But I think as my intellect started engaging with the Bible and the way church was done, I started to see things that I wasn't exactly happy about. And was motivated to stay part of this belief set and this religion. My whole community was based around it, and I love the idea that it is based on a loving creator and prizes self-sacrifice and a greater purpose. And so my mind went to work to resolve these differences that I was seeing in the way that I see the world and how the Bible seemed and the church seemed to present them. So I think I have a very intellectual mind. In fact, it's to my disservice sometimes. I have OCD in some categories, which really makes it hard. But then also I'm very, very creative. So when I smash those things together and I have the motivation to try to solve this dissonance, I started coming up with these creative, logical solutions that could be creative perspectives on some of these old problems and issues that this world could level against the Christian faith.
Yes. Like what?
Um, Hell. What the heck is hell about? Why would
I want to, that is, I think that's a great one. It's, the elephant in the living room. We'll go ahead and have that as a, so in my intellect, as I was growing up, I would try and, now why would God need hell? that was just my thought. I mean, what? All right, this is omniscient, omnipresent
Mhm.
being that. What do you need help for? What is the purpose? I mean, I could see it was one of these things where I read in the Bible, that God made us in Him as in His image in the Christian Bible, and it felt like that I was making God in my image by creating a hell.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to answer that question first, and then I'm going to tell you the next most difficult question out there is why is there suffering? And it's related to that same exact question. Why would God create an earth with suffering? So let's go to hell. My attempt at trying to resolve this issue of why would God create hell is this, especially with the help of C.S. Lewis and his book, The Great Divorce. He had a really interesting idea. And I've just taken it a step further and kind of created the potentially a story that could have led to him creating a place that we think of as hell. Here it is. If God has a kingdom, and in order to live in a peaceful kingdom, you have to obey the rules of the kingdom. In a kingdom where people don't obey the governing laws of the land, it turns into chaos. So if God says anybody can come into this kingdom, I want everybody to be in what we call heaven. But there are some people who say, I've lived this life and I don't want to obey your laws. Like, I trust I can do it better. Would God make them come into a place where they have to obey? I think it would be him giving them permission to walk away and try to do things the way that they would prefer to. Now, let's go to the logical end of that. If there is a place that God created for people or even other spirits to go to that weren't willing to obey him, what would that place look like? Number one, it's full of other spirits who want to do their own will. And if you have a bunch of entities, spirits, and humans who are in this place trying to get their own will, suddenly you have a competition for resources, especially if you've been separated from the source of creation. And maybe he's given this kind of land of some sort where he is like, I will step back from that place. I will not govern it. Y'all can live there, but you'll have to figure out how to get along. Now imagine there's those higher level beings like fallen angels that are there looking for their will. And suddenly it looks a lot like they are the masters. We become the slaves. Each one is vying for their own interests. And it probably looks like the worst situation that this earth could become. That's probably what hell is like in my mind. And it explains why God would let it exist.
All right. While I can understand that, to me though, that there is always movement
Mm,
toward
mm,
light. So I cannot imagine. I mean, I understand this concept of purgatory, which never made a lot of sense to me, but
mhm.
but the idea of saying, okay, I'm learning. I see that this is probably not the best way that I'm going to want to live anymore.
Mhm. I sure hope there's an open door back into heaven. I sure hope.
I can't imagine it being any other way. Not because I think of humans who have children,
Mhm,
and you have a child, and however that child misbehaves, whatever that there is still going to be that love for it, and there's still always going to be an opportunity for that parent
yeah.
to. I'm talking about human parents. Now I'm talking about this concept. We're going to use I'm going to use the word God, irrespective of what it
Okay.
is that God would be able to have this infinite love and infinite compassion that it would that God would have any less than what a human might have for its
Mhm,
children.
mhm. Oh man, yeah, I hope so, Dennis. I trust that God is a God of love. But he also knows things greater than me, and I suppose it's possible that people become um so self-serving and perhaps stubborn that their way is the only way they can trust.
Exactly, exactly. But give them a couple of billion years.
Yeah, maybe they come around.
Maybe in a couple of billion years. So because with me, I mean, I'm 76 right now. I'm learning more at 76 than I knew at
Mm,
75. I'm more teachable at 76 than I was at 75.
mhm.
There are things that we're not working that are working now because I'm doing it, and so I'm perhaps give me a couple of billion years,
Yeah.
perhaps I'll be able to do that.
I love that idea. And I did sort of a deep dive recently into hell, and there's different ideas on what like forever means. Because like right now we're in a linear time kind of spectrum. Who
Yep.
knows? What if this world expires and we're now in a different type of forever doesn't mean never. Forever now suddenly means now all bets are off because forever was only applicable when time was.
Only in this particular, because one of the things that we know from or we don't know, but they're working on, and within quantum mechanics and the
Yeah.
string theory is that we are understanding is that there are different planes of existence. There are many different. Assuming that that is true, then there is, and I was also thinking that, all right, let's say that I have my algebra book
Okay.
in front of me, and there's an ant that is walking across my algebra book. Now, I don't expect that ant to be able to understand those quadratic equation. It's not something. It's not something that ant can comprehend. So I was thinking, well, what if mine to this creator is the same way that I cannot
Yeah.
comprehend. I don't have, even in the best of my intellect, or as Feynman said of God, he says God is too big for the stage. You know,
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
if I can't even comprehend what life is or what that is, then now I can let that go and not try to judge it on my own intellect.
I love that. And Dennis, let's dive into astrophysics for a second because this has been one of the things I've been excited about recently. Um, I thought I solved dark matter. Do you know what dark matter is?
Yes.
Like you do. I'll
Oh,
explain.
I mean, do I know what dark matter is? I
Yeah,
think I do. I have concepts of that and black holes and this that I've
yeah.
studied, but if I know it for sure, no, well, I'm not
You
sure.
don't know the answer of what? No, I'm just kidding. That's so it's for the audience. This is one of the biggest open questions in astrophysics and some of those related fields. It's like they see gravity out there operating that there's not enough mass to account for it. Like in order to get gravity, you need a certain amount of mass. Then you see its effect. So here was my idea that I was playing with the other day, and I've recently realized it's more complex than this. But check out this idea really quick. So in three-dimensional gravity, if you have, let's say, a meteor getting closer and closer to the Earth, the force of gravity on it goes up at an exponential rate the closer you get. So there's, let's say, 1 pound of gravity pulling them together, but when it gets closer, there's 2 pounds, 4 pounds, 8 pounds, whatever. It goes up like this.
Yep.
So here's my idea of where the gravity is coming from. There's also areas in the universe where time bends. And according to Einstein, we're on this space and time plane.
Time period continuum. Hmm.
Okay, so imagine where if you have a penny or some object on second one, and picture the same penny on second two, and the same penny on second three. Now imagine that you go to a place in the time continuum where your seconds are actually closer together than they are in other places.
Of course.
What if that gravity that we think is coming from this invisible dark matter is actually from that same penny feeling gravity more towards itself in those areas where the time is getting closer together? Does that make sense?
Wow.
Okay.
Yes.
So recently, after that, I tried to send this to some astrophysicists, trying to connect, like, guys, I think I have this great idea. And they're like, you do not understand differential equations and the relativity equations of Einstein. So I tried to look deeper into those, and that's above my understanding at this point. Even though I took differential equations back in engineering school,
Oh
I
yeah.
Didn't quite master them well enough. So now I've been thinking a lot more about, now this is where heaven comes into being. All right, so now they kind of think as this space-time continuum as a rubber sheet, and where large objects of mass pull down on the rubber sheet. It's kind of like, you can imagine something that rolls along, they get pulled into it like it's rolling down this rubber sheet, which kind of symbolizes gravity pulling them in.
Right, like a gravity well.
Yeah, I think that's the word for it. Yeah. And then so imagine the times though, like if you had a grid, those grid lines would start to stretch as the
Yep.
rubber gets pulled down. And so time gets closer together, I think, in those times where in those places where there's a lot of gravity. Time slows down, actually. Time slows down because in a black hole, you have basically what equates to something very heavy pointed so far down, you don't know where the bottom is. And time gets closer and closer to zero. So check out this idea. Imagine we have a plane of space-time. Now bend it into a sphere. And imagine that places along the sphere, you have black holes pushing down on the surface. And they push down on the surface in all these different directions, and they meet in the middle. And time slows down as you get closer and closer to the middle, because it's the same thing as if it was up here, and as it bends down, it gets closer and closer to zero. So if we're putting that into a sphere now, closer and closer it gets to the zero, you're hitting time equals zero. No time passes. So what if that is somewhat where heaven exists? And get this, mass increases infinitely, exponentially infinitely as, yeah. So in a black hole, you know how in this world, like all the cells and atoms that make up my body, they're 99% space. Like they're zooming around in their own little matrices with like so much space in between them. But imagine that at this black hole area, at the center of this sphere where time is zero and mass is
infinite.
What if all those atoms are now close enough that they're touching each other? What if heaven is that much more real than the experience we have on earth? This experience that we have on earth is 99.5% less real than the solid reality of heaven. And in the Great Divorce, C.S. Lewis talks about, and this is an idea from the guy Charles MacDonald, who he got the idea from, but he put it in the Great Divorce, that Heaven and Hell book, where when he stepped out into heaven, the blades of grass were so real, it poked up on his feet. Like it was painful until he walked further and further into heaven, and he became more real through pain, solidifying who you are as a person and putting into you more character, more resistance to evil, more disciplines. You become more real as you march towards heaven. Okay, so remember I told you the solution to pain and suffering in this world.
Yes.
I think I have a new a theory of why God would create a world with suffering in it. And it comes down to that same sort of idea. I think there's three. I did my thesis in theology school on this idea. It's called theodicy. Why is there suffering if we have a good God? So here are my 3 points, if I can remember them all. Number one, there are virtues that we could not grow in if we were not placed in a fallen world. I would never have to learn forgiveness if I was in a place where I was never hurt. I would never have to learn long suffering and patience and endurance. I would never have to learn sacrificial love in a place where love came easy. And the list could go on. And if God sees in us the potential to be beings of so much more substance, we would need to grow in these areas that free will has enabled us to grow. So that's number one. Perhaps we are in a world with suffering because there are virtues that we would never be able to grow in a world where there was not suffering. Number two, are you still with me? Should I keep going?
Absolutely. Keep going.
Number two was in a fallen world, we would never get to see the depths of the virtues of others in this world, including Jesus. So I'm a believer in Jesus, and I think it's amazing, if he truly was the Son of God, that we get to see the depths that our God would go to bring us back to him. The Christian faith talks about God came down in the form of a human to suffer with us, basically to die so that we could be forgiven of our sins and go to heaven. And we would never have to see the depths of that sacrificial love that our God has for us in a world where no death was necessary, where no death existed.
Right.
And part three, the last reason why God might put us in a world where there's suffering is we get to see, in contrast to the perfected world, what a world of our own making can lead us to. It puts us in a place where we see, when I do something of my own will, it leads me down this path. And what it turns into, oftentimes, that is an unhappy life or suffering for other people, or just a general system of people abusing other people. And we get to say, okay, now I have a contrast to see what it can become, and it helps me choose what it was made to be.
So, all right, you're in theology school and you're presenting these principles. And so, what's the what do they think?
Gosh, Dennis, I don't think I know how to write a typical theology paper.
No kidding.
I presented these creative ideas because I was like, I think I have something here. And the my mentor, who knows how to do traditional theological papers and
Right,
scholarly work and stuff, is like, wait a minute, this is like too out of left field. You need to build your argument upon, previous perspectives to show that somehow you now have a basis to speak from where you are. It's like,
right.
we have in the theology school, I think they prize discussion between theologians and scholars, and then you come up with a slightly unique view of that. I just came about it from my own digging through the trenches, mining through my mind, and inspiration from other sources, say,
Right.
okay, this works for me.
Don't you think that in my reading of it, or my reading of it, was how Jesus did it?
Hmm.
And Jesus had many of the same arguments against what he was coming at.
Tell me more.
It's just that his, I mean, he came up in a non-traditional way. He came up, had his own ideas, his own ways, and the Pharisees, Sadducees. I'm sorry, I don't know enough about my Bible to know. But anyway, the Jewish elders said, "No, wait a minute. What is this kid? What is this kid? He speaks with such authority. What is going on here?"
Yeah. Yeah. I think he did a lot better than I did with
Right,
he,
exactly, but that's all part of the process, because I find this idea of Jesus fascinating.
oh, cool.
I mean, I really do. I mean, I want to know. I want to know that those times between like age 12 and 30,
Yeah.
because I mean, I've studied that there are people in India and in the East who have records of that he made some travels during that time as
Wow.
this was happening as part of his education about what, because that's a time when I'm really interested.
Very cool. I wish I knew more too. Yeah, and I know the Mormons think, the Latter-day Saints say, that after he died, he went to the American continent
Yeah.
and educated people there. I love these creative explorations of what it could be. I try not to go too deep on basing my faith on that, but I sure think it's a possibility.
But this is the whole thing. I mean, so much is a possibility, and how much of it is actionable in my life. What is
Mm,
it going to do? What is it going to do to lead me toward greater compassion toward myself?
mm,
Greater forgiveness for myself. I mean, I'm I'm very self-absorbed. I'm a very self-centered human being, and what I have found over my life, Ross, is that anything that I'm holding against you, I'm first holding it against myself.
Mhm.
That I really need to do that work, that interior work first. And that way, then I'm able to let it go to the other. So that's
Mm.
a big part of the work that I'm doing, and it's a fascinating process.
Man, I'm so glad to hear that that's your perspective on life. I think many people, as they get older, they become harder and less flexible. Um, and I love that you're trying your best to work on yourself and learning the most you ever have. I think that I want to be like that, Dennis.
Yeah, well,
You're,
you are, but this is, I mean, because this, we're on a continuum. And one of the things I want, I mean, I was thinking about, let's continue on our conversation about quantum mechanics and all, because I want to relate that to Jesus in
ooh,
the sense that I had this same thought like you did, and I thought, now wait a minute, what if how Jesus performed his miracles was because of entanglement?
ooh, yeah, okay, okay.
Because if I am so certain that everything that is entangled anyway, because it exists in two places. It exists in my mind and it exists out here, right? So that's two places. So there is an entanglement principle there. So that if I had a consciousness that was had such a degree of certitude that I could change my
Wow.
mind inside of here, that by law, not by any other, but by law, it would have to change
Oh my
out
gosh.
here. So therefore it would, if I could change, if I could do this with water, and I could change that into, and of course it would change, not by some poofy mirror, but just by basic quantum mechanical law.
Wow, that's amazing. I had not thought of that. So if anybody doesn't know what quantum entanglement is, they've done experiments where if you separate, they do an operation on a an an atom molecule, and then they separate the parts, and they're able to change the spin of one. And even if this is separated across the world, it'll change instantaneously to match it. Something like
Beyond the speed of light, beyond the speed
right,
of
right,
light, it doesn't, I mean,
yeah.
they have proven and they have seen that it works. So that was the principle that I was applying to how, because consciousness, that was how it happened. That would be one way that it could work.
Can I extend that to some more ideas? Let's do
Please.
it. So I suppose if I have like we all have a perspective of how this world operates. My wife definitely sees things different than I do, and I understand interactions of things in a different way than you do, and everybody
Yeah.
does. So I wonder if the more correct your I say correct, I believe certain things that are sort of objective about I don't know how molecules work and
Yeah.
laws of nature and stuff. Like I wonder if the closer my understanding of the world can get to objective truth, I get closer and closer able to manipulate those pieces in my mind to reflect out here. So the only person who could really do it perfectly would be the creator. Like the app that I built, if someone were to go in there and try to like change things, they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, how did this guy organize this?" I mean, maybe hopefully I've organized it well, but um, so I think the creator is the one who knows, like, well, I know exactly where that molecule goes. I know exactly the small atomic forces and the gravity that's operating on it and exactly how to change it. So
Yeah.
if Jesus is God, that would make sense. But I know there's a lot of people who have like exhibited miracles of one type or another.